The moment I walked across that graduation stage, my parents didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They didn't even glance at me with pride. Instead, my father leaned toward my mother, smirking, and whispered, "She'll never make it on her own." That one line hit harder than any insult could. And in that instant, I knew everything I had been told about my potential, my worth, and my future had been a lie, not just from strangers or classmates, but from the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. My parents had cut me off financially the week before, saying, "If you want to chase dreams, do it without us." And suddenly the safety net I had counted on vanished. No money for rent, no money for groceries, not even a dime for emergencies. Most people in that position would have panicked, cried, begged, or given up entirely. But something inside me ignited instead. A fire fueled by every mocking laugh, every sarcastic remark, every whispered "she'll fail" I had ever endured. I started juggling 3 jobs simultaneously, one at a cafe, one at a small marketing firm, and one freelance project online. I discovered a discipline I didn't know I had. Staying up until 2 a.m. studying business tutorials, reading case studies, and learning the mechanics of investing while everyone around me assumed I was struggling to survive. Every small win became a quiet victory, an invisible rebellion against the narrative my parents had written for me. I learned to stretch every dollar, make calculated risks, and remain calm in the face of doubt and ridicule. Every single sarcastic comment from them, every dismissive glance from relatives, became motivation rather than discouragement. I refused to confront them directly. Confrontation was their style, but I wanted results they couldn't ignore. I wasn't seeking revenge through words or drama. I was building it silently, meticulously, in ways they would never see coming. Each step, every long night and sacrifice, was like a silent brick in the foundation of a plan they didn't even know existed, a plan that would eventually change everything. I didn't just want to prove them wrong. I wanted the outcome to speak louder than any argument could, a payoff so precise and so satisfying that their disbelief would finally meet the reality they had mocked for so long. And the quiet truth was, the entire world outside my parents would witness it first, while they were left in stunned silence. I threw myself into every task with a focus that surprised even me. The cafe job was exhausting, but it taught me patience, attention to detail, and the value of treating every customer with care, even the ones who were rude or dismissive. At the marketing firm, I observed patterns, client behavior, and how small decisions could lead to massive results. Freelancing gave me independence and a taste of responsibility I had never experienced before, forcing me to solve problems on my own without anyone to guide or rescue me. Nights were the hardest. My tiny apartment was silent except for the hum of my laptop and the soft scribble of my notes as I learned about investing, stock movements, and the fundamentals of running a small business. I often caught myself smiling quietly in the dark, imagining a future where the people who had doubted me would see my success, though I kept it entirely to myself. Every dollar I saved, every skill I acquired, every contact I made was a step toward that invisible goal. My parents continued their cold treatment, and relatives continued their subtle jabs, each comment unknowingly fueling my determination. "You'll never succeed," my father would say during a family gathering, and I would nod politely, keeping my calm, because I knew success was my quiet weapon and I would wield it when the time was perfect. I began sketching ideas for my first small business venture, using late-night hours to plan every detail meticulously: budget, marketing, product sourcing, client outreach, all while keeping my progress invisible. Some nights, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, but I reminded myself that every sacrifice was a brick in the foundation of the plan that my parents would never see coming. I couldn't let impatience ruin it. The payoff had to be flawless, and with every passing month, the subtle taste of control grew sweeter, the quiet thrill of knowing that one day I would turn the tables completely. By the time the first real signs of success appeared, I was no longer just surviving. I was building momentum, a life completely my own, a life that would make the whispers of "she'll never make it" sound utterly ridiculous. The thought alone made my determination sharper. I knew exactly how I would reveal it all. And that day would be silent but unforgettable. The kind of payoff no one could ignore. By the time a year had passed, I had mastered the delicate balance of work, study, and planning. My small freelance projects had started bringing in more money than I ever expected, and the cafe and marketing jobs had taught me skills no classroom ever could. I noticed patterns in how people spent, saved, and invested, and I started applying those insights to my own finances. Every morning I would wake up, brew a cup of coffee, and review my notes, calculating how I could stretch my resources further, how I could turn $100 investment into $1,000, and then how to compound that quietly over time. My parents continued their routine of dismissive remarks whenever I saw them, telling relatives I was just a phase or still figuring life out. I used their words as fuel, imagining them years from now, looking at me and realizing exactly who had been underestimating whom. There was no confrontation, no shouting matches, no drama. I didn't need it. Every decision, every long night, every small win was a silent punchline they wouldn't see coming. I started researching local real estate, curious about property values and rental potential, never letting anyone know I was even considering it. My heart would race quietly when I imagined owning a property someday that my parents could never forget. A tangible proof of everything they had refused to believe. Friends began to notice my calm confidence. They asked me what I was doing differently, and I just smiled, giving vague answers. I didn't need recognition from anyone else. I needed only the satisfaction of building something solid and untouchable. By the end of the year, I had not only stabilized my finances, but had also built a small emergency fund and started investing in small properties, each one a stepping stone toward a goal I kept strictly to myself. Each night I would imagine the day I finally had the power to show them, to let the results speak louder than any argument ever could, and the thought alone made the exhaustion worth it. I was patient, deliberate, and meticulous. The quiet revenge I was constructing wasn't about humiliation. It was about proof. Proof that their disbelief, their mockery, their casual dismissal of me had never mattered because I was already succeeding in a world they had never imagined I could touch. By the time I had been working quietly for nearly 2 years, the pattern of my life had completely shifted. My multiple jobs were no longer just survival. They had become a training ground, a laboratory where I experimented with skills, strategies, and opportunities that would later define my independence. I had learned to negotiate contracts, read people's intentions, manage small teams, and plan meticulously. All skills my parents had assumed I would never develop. Every month, as I tracked my small earnings and investments, I felt a quiet thrill. The numbers were proof that I was creating something they could never dismiss. During family gatherings, when my father casually mentioned that I was still finding my path, or relatives whispered behind my back about how she'll never make it, I smiled internally, imagining the day when the outcome would speak for itself. I didn't confront anyone. Confrontation had no power. My strategy was patience and meticulous action. I began exploring real estate more seriously, studying neighborhoods, market trends, and rental yields, quietly noting properties I could afford with the funds I had been building silently. Each opportunity I identified was like a hidden gem, a future stepping stone in the revenge I had carefully plotted. Not vengeance for the sake of anger, but proof, undeniable proof, that I could outmaneuver every assumption they had made about me. I started small, a single unit in a modest building, paid in full through savings and small loans I had qualified for without their knowledge. The process of acquiring it was slow, deliberate, and invisible to everyone in my family. Every time I walked past the property, imagining what I could do next, I felt an exhilarating mix of anticipation and satisfaction. I realized my parents' laughter and disbelief had fueled a precision in me they could never have instilled. While they were mocking me, I was quietly constructing freedom, stability, and eventually, the moment of proof. Each decision, no matter how small, was part of the foundation of a plan that would leave them stunned one day, not through drama, shouting, or confrontation, but through undeniable reality. And the thought that every choice, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was leading to a silent, flawless revelation made every struggle worth enduring. I was no longer just surviving. I was orchestrating a life that would make them reconsider every word they had ever said about me. By the time the third year rolled around, the first real signs of success were beginning to appear, subtle yet undeniable. My small investments and careful savings had grown, enough that I could confidently consider a larger property, something my parents would have immediately dismissed as impossible for me. I kept it all secret, of course. No one in the family, not a single relative, knew how far I had come. The thought of revealing anything prematurely would have ruined the silent momentum I had built. Every day I continued juggling work, freelance projects, and property research, building not just financial strength but a quiet, unshakable confidence in my abilities. It was strange, almost intoxicating, to realize that the very people who had mocked me for being naive and impractical were completely unaware of the empire I was constructing. Behind the scenes, I started scouting a slightly larger building, one that could eventually house multiple tenants. I visited it during my lunch breaks, pretending to be just another passerby, taking notes, analyzing layouts, and imagining what it could become. At home, I would stay up late drawing out plans, budgeting, calculating every possible expense and income stream with a precision that would have impressed any seasoned investor. My parents, of course, remained blissfully unaware. Every casual insult, every subtle jab, every whispered word of doubt only sharpened my resolve. "She'll never make it," my father said to a visiting relative. And I smiled to myself, savoring the thought that their disbelief was now nothing more than fuel. Slowly, I began seeing the first tangible results of my hard work. The freelance income was exceeding expectations. My small investments were yielding profit, and I was finally in a position to make the next strategic move. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that they had no idea what I was capable of was almost addictive. For the first time, I truly believed in my plan, not just in theory, but in the proof of numbers, effort, and perseverance. The best part? They had no idea that every single late night, every dollar saved, every risk taken in silence, was slowly but surely setting the stage for a moment that would leave them stunned, speechless, and utterly powerless to argue or undermine me. My revenge wasn't anger or shouting. It was inevitable. It was precise. And it was about to unfold in a way that no one could skip or ignore. By the time I finally signed the papers for my first substantial property, a modest multi-unit building in a quiet neighborhood, I felt a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. All those years of juggling jobs, late nights, careful budgeting, and secret research had culminated in this exact moment, and no one in my family had a clue. My parents still treated me like a naive girl who couldn't manage her own life, and relatives continued to murmur behind their hands about how she's trying but won't last. I held back my smile during the family calls, my excitement simmering just beneath the surface. They had no idea that I had quietly acquired a tangible, valuable asset that would not only generate passive income, but also serve as a stepping stone to something far bigger. I walked through the building for the first time alone, imagining every detail, how I would renovate units, attract tenants, and eventually expand. The thrill of seeing a real, visible proof of my capabilities was unlike anything I had experienced before. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about the ultimate payoff, the day when I could reveal everything, and the disbelief on their faces would be priceless. I started managing the renovation, contacting contractors, and learning the logistics of property management. Each small victory, the first tenant signed, the first rent deposited, felt like a quiet victory over every dismissive word. Every smirk and every sarcastic laugh my parents had thrown my way. I noticed subtle changes in their behavior during phone calls or family gatherings. My father would ask questions about my career, trying to sound casual but clearly probing, and my mother seemed slightly less condescending. Though neither suspected how far I had come, I kept everything intentionally low-key, savoring the irony that their first inklings of my success were only superficial, while the real proof remained invisible until the time was right. Each day I felt more confident, more calculated, and more in control. My revenge was no longer just a plan. It was actively unfolding, precise, inevitable, and deeply satisfying in its quiet persistence. I didn't need drama or confrontation. The results alone would speak louder than anything I could ever say, and every small step I took brought me closer to the day they would finally understand the power of the person they had underestimated for so long. As the months went by, my confidence and independence grew alongside the building I now owned. Renovations were complete, tenants were moving in, and I had learned more about real estate, management, and negotiation than I ever imagined possible. Each morning I would walk through the property, inspecting every corner, taking notes on potential improvements, and silently celebrating how far I had come. My parents remained in their world of disbelief, still dismissing my career as just small experiments and assuming I was struggling behind the scenes. Yet subtly, I began noticing little cracks in their assumptions. During one phone call, my father asked almost hesitantly about my income, and I could hear the curiosity beneath his usual condescension. My mother, on the other hand, had begun to offer unsolicited advice on money management, clearly unaware that I was already managing more than they could comprehend. Each interaction was a reminder of the silent power I was accumulating and the inevitability of the revelation to come. At the same time, my freelance work continued to thrive, giving me additional funds to reinvest in the property and start looking for my next opportunity. I had begun to feel a sense of pride that wasn't just about financial success but about the control I now held over my own life, something they had never been able to take from me. Every small victory, the first positive review from a tenant, a successful negotiation with a contractor, an efficient solution to an unexpected problem, felt like a quiet, personal triumph. I deliberately avoided sharing any of this with my family, keeping my success invisible, letting it accumulate like a slow, unstoppable wave that they could neither see nor stop. The thought of the day I would finally reveal everything thrilled me. The look on their faces, the shock, the realization that all their doubts, dismissals, and underestimations had been completely wrong. And while they continued their casual judgment, completely unaware of the empire I was quietly building, I felt an almost addictive satisfaction, knowing that patience and careful planning would deliver a silent but undeniable victory. Every day, my determination deepened, and the quiet revenge I was orchestrating was no longer just a dream. It was taking shape, unstoppable, inevitable, and utterly satisfying in its calm, precise execution. By the 4th year, the building I had quietly acquired and renovated was fully operational, generating steady income, and I began to see the tangible power of the life I had been building in silence. Every tenant move-in, every rent deposit, every maintenance issue resolved, flawlessly felt like a quiet victory over every sarcastic remark, every sneer, and every dismissive comment my parents had thrown my way for years. I had become disciplined to a level they could never imagine, balancing multiple streams of income, tracking budgets meticulously, and reinvesting profits strategically to grow my assets further. My parents, of course, still believed I was just surviving, oblivious to the fact that I was thriving, far beyond their expectations. The subtle cracks in their assumptions were becoming more noticeable. My father started asking slightly more pointed questions about my finances during family dinners, and my mother's advice about being careful with money now had an edge of hesitancy, as if she were subconsciously realizing that I knew more than I was letting on. I smiled quietly at each of these moments, savoring the knowledge that my revenge didn't need confrontation or drama. It only needed patience and consistency. At the same time, I began scouting my next investment, a slightly larger property that would expand my influence and income streams even further. Every visit to potential buildings was like a secret mission. I observed, calculated, and planned, knowing that every decision I made now would set the stage for a future payoff so precise and undeniable that my parents would have no choice but to acknowledge it when the time came. I kept detailed notes, mapped potential renovations, estimated rental yields, and plotted every financial move like a chess game. My friends noticed the quiet confidence I carried, but none of them had any idea of the scale of what I was accomplishing. Each step I took, every dollar reinvested, and every decision carefully executed was a silent strike, an invisible wave of revenge building momentum in a calm, unstoppable way. The satisfaction of knowing that my parents' disbelief and mockery had fueled this methodical climb made every sleepless night, every sacrifice, and every risk worth it. I wasn't just preparing for success, I was preparing for the moment when the full magnitude of my achievements would leave them stunned, speechless, and completely powerless to dismiss what I had quietly accomplished. By now, the empire I had been quietly building was no longer just numbers on paper. It was real, tangible, and quietly commanding attention. My first building had stabilized. Tenants were happy, and the revenue was steady, giving me the confidence to approach larger investments. I began researching a second property, bigger and more prestigious, the kind that would make people stop and take notice. The thrill of scouting it, walking through empty units, imagining the transformation, and knowing that my parents had no idea of my progress, gave me a satisfaction that words could never capture. During family gatherings, I noticed subtle changes in their behavior. My father asked questions about what I was doing for work these days, phrasing them casually, but his tone betrayed curiosity and perhaps even worry. My mother had started making offhand comments about investing wisely and saving for the future, which in the past, she would never have dared to mention to me. I smiled silently each time, knowing that every late night, every sleepless hour, every painstaking decision had brought me to this exact moment. I wasn't looking for confrontation. My revenge wasn't about humiliating them in public. It was about creating a reality so undeniable that they couldn't ignore it, no matter how much they tried. My friends began to notice that my focus and calm confidence had shifted. I was no longer the girl they used to casually dismiss. Every meeting with contractors, every negotiation, every strategic investment was another invisible strike, another step closer to the payoff I had meticulously planned. I kept my plans hidden, never dropping hints, always careful to maintain the illusion of being just busy or making ends meet. And yet, inside, I felt a thrill I couldn't describe, a quiet satisfaction that each day brought me closer to a moment that would be unforgettable, not for drama or shouting, but for the undeniable truth my parents would have to face, that their disbelief, their underestimation, and their casual mockery had all fueled a silent, precise, and completely unstoppable success. Every night I would visualize that moment, the shock on their faces, the realization that all those years of ignoring and doubting me were meaningless, and the thought alone made every sacrifice worth it. My revenge wasn't loud, it was inevitable, and I was ready to see it unfold. By the beginning of the 5th year, I had quietly amassed enough capital and confidence to take the next major step. I identified a larger building in a more prominent part of the city, one that would not only increase my income but also cement my presence as someone who could not be ignored. I visited it during early mornings, pretending to be a curious passerby, taking detailed notes, photographing layouts, and imagining the transformation I could orchestrate. Every night, I mapped out renovation plans, budgets, and tenant strategies with meticulous precision, knowing that this investment would be the cornerstone of the silent empire I had been building for years. At the same time, I noticed subtle shifts in my parents' behavior. My father, once smug and dismissive, now asked indirect questions about my work, phrased in that casual tone that tried to mask genuine curiosity, and my mother had started offering advice on budgeting and saving, almost instinctively, acknowledging my growing expertise without realizing how far I had truly come. I kept my excitement buried under calm composure, deliberately maintaining the illusion that I was still struggling and learning, all the while watching my empire expand. Every tenant signed, every contractor managed, and every strategic investment completed felt like a quiet strike of precision against years of dismissal and mockery. I didn't need dramatic confrontations or arguments. My revenge was measured, deliberate, and unstoppable. Each passing day brought me closer to the moment when I would finally reveal the truth, not through shouting, humiliation, or confrontation, but through undeniable results that would leave my parents stunned and speechless. The thrill of knowing that they had no idea of the scale of my achievements while simultaneously building something tangible that would eventually make them acknowledge my success, was intoxicating. Even my friends noticed the shift in my demeanor. There was a quiet power in the way I carried myself, the way I spoke. The calm confidence that came from knowing my long-term plan was unfolding flawlessly. I could feel it in every conversation, every subtle glance, every assumption they made about me. They were all being silently dismantled by my patient, methodical work. And as I signed the final preliminary contracts for this new building, I realized that the real proof, the one that would make every doubt, every laugh, and every dismissive comment meaningless, was finally within reach. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was about to demonstrate in the calmest, most precise way imaginable that their disbelief had been completely, undeniably wrong. Within a few weeks of finalizing the contracts for my second building, the first tangible signs of success began to show in ways I had meticulously planned. Tenants were moving in, rents were flowing, and the property was starting to generate real income, far beyond anything my parents could have imagined I was capable of. Every small victory felt like a personal triumph, a quiet but powerful answer to every sarcastic comment, every smirk, and every dismissive laugh they had directed at me over the years. My parents, of course, remained unaware of the scale of what I had built. My father would casually ask about my work, trying to mask curiosity, while my mother, unknowingly acknowledging my growing independence, began offering friendly advice on investments and budgeting. Each of these interactions felt like a subtle confirmation that my invisible progress was beginning to peek through their carefully constructed assumptions. I maintained my calm composure, never giving away even a hint of the empire I was quietly constructing, because I knew the payoff had to be perfect, precise, and undeniable. The building itself was my silent weapon. Every signed lease, every completed renovation, every tenant satisfied with their new home was another brick in the foundation of the plan that would leave my parents stunned. At the same time, my confidence soared. I began to consider long-term strategies, expanding into more properties, diversifying my investments, and planning every step to ensure that nothing could derail the slow, unstoppable momentum I had built. My friends noticed the subtle shift in me, the calm yet confident way I carried myself, the quiet assurance that I was in complete control of my life. But none of them knew the full extent of the careful, calculated steps I had taken to reach this point. Every night I would sit with spreadsheets, notes, and visions of the future, imagining the moment when I would finally reveal everything, not with anger or confrontation, but with results so undeniable that my parents could not ignore them. That anticipation alone fueled my discipline, my patience, and my meticulous planning. Every small action, every sleepless night, every calculated risk was now a part of a story that was quietly building toward the moment of ultimate, calm, and completely satisfying revenge. I wasn't just creating wealth or success. I was constructing proof, a reality that would leave every doubt, every insult, and every underestimation utterly meaningless. Within a few weeks of finalizing the contracts for my second building, the first tangible signs of success began to show in ways I had meticulously planned. Tenants were moving in, rents were flowing, and the property was starting to generate real income, far beyond anything my parents could have imagined I was capable of. Every small victory felt like a personal triumph, a quiet but powerful answer to every sarcastic comment, every smirk, and every dismissive laugh they had directed at me over the years. My parents, of course, remained unaware of the scale of what I had built. My father would casually ask about my work, trying to mask curiosity, while my mother, unknowingly acknowledging my growing independence, began offering friendly advice on investments and budgeting. Each of these interactions felt like a subtle confirmation that my invisible progress was beginning to peek through their carefully constructed assumptions. I maintained my calm composure, never giving away even a hint of the empire I was quietly constructing, because I knew the payoff had to be perfect, precise, and undeniable. The building itself was my silent weapon. Every signed lease, every completed renovation, every tenant satisfied with their new home was another brick in the foundation of the plan that would leave my parents stunned. At the same time, my confidence soared. I began to consider long-term strategies, expanding into more properties, diversifying my investments, and planning every step to ensure that nothing could derail the slow, unstoppable momentum I had built. My friends noticed the subtle shift in me, the calm yet confident way I carried myself, the quiet assurance that I was in complete control of my life. But none of them knew the full extent of the careful, calculated steps I had taken to reach this point. Every night I would sit with spreadsheets, notes and visions of the future, imagining the moment when I would finally reveal everything, not with anger or confrontation, but with results so undeniable that my parents could not ignore them. That anticipation alone fueled my discipline, my patience, and my meticulous planning. Every small action, every sleepless night, every calculated risk was now a part of a story that was quietly building toward the moment of ultimate, calm and completely satisfying revenge. I wasn't just creating wealth or success. I was constructing proof, a reality that would leave every doubt, every insult, and every underestimation utterly meaningless. The closing date for my third property was set, and every detail was aligning with an almost unsettling precision. I didn't rush anything. I reviewed contracts line by line, confirmed financing structures, secured long-term tenants in advance, and finalized renovations before the ink even dried. By the time ownership officially transferred to my LLC, the building was already generating projected revenue. What made it different wasn't just the scale, it was the location. It was in the same upscale district my father used to point at whenever he drove past and say, "People like us don't own places there." I remembered that sentence vividly. Back then, it sounded like a rule carved in stone. Now it felt like a challenge I had quietly accepted. At home, preparations for his birthday had started. My mother was organizing a small dinner, close family only. I offered to handle part of the arrangements, something I rarely did, and they both seemed mildly surprised by my initiative. My father, still unaware, made a passing joke about hoping one day I'd settle into something stable. I smiled, not defensively, not bitterly, just calmly, because stability was no longer something I was chasing. It was something I owned. Meanwhile, my accountant sent over a consolidated report of my portfolio, and seeing the total valuation laid out in one clean summary made my heart beat slow rather than race. I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. The years of silence, discipline, and restraint had shaped me into someone who didn't need approval. The revenge had evolved beyond proving them wrong. It had become proof that I had rebuilt my identity without their belief. A few days before the birthday dinner, my father mentioned financial stress over an upcoming business investment, speaking openly in a way he never used to around me. For the first time, I saw not authority, not superiority, but uncertainty. That shift was subtle but powerful. And as I placed the finalized property, deed into a simple envelope, with his name written neatly on the front, I understood something deeply satisfying. The reveal wasn't going to humiliate him. It was going to redefine the way he saw me forever. The countdown had begun, and this time, I wasn't the underestimated daughter sitting quietly at the table. I was the silent architect of a moment that would change everything. The night of my father's birthday dinner arrived, and everything was set to perfection. I arrived early, casually dressed but composed, carrying myself with the calm confidence I had cultivated over years of silent planning. The house smelled faintly of candles and baked goods my mother had prepared, laughter and chatter echoing from the kitchen where relatives mingled. My father greeted me with a casual nod, unaware of the envelope I had slipped into my bag, and of the magnitude it contained. The subtle tension in the room was palpable for me, even if no one else sensed it. As guests settled, I offered to help with serving drinks and arranging plates, maintaining the illusion of being helpful yet unremarkable. All the while, my mind was calculating every detail, observing body language and anticipating reactions. My father made a few jokes about finances and career paths, completely unaware that the woman he had doubted for years was about to rewrite the narrative in a way no one could ignore. I smiled quietly, exchanging polite words, but internally, I felt the calm thrill of power, measured, precise, unstoppable. Every laugh, every casual comment from family members, Every assumption my parents made about my future was feeding the satisfaction that had been years in the making. As dessert was served, I excused myself to retrieve something from my bag. The envelope was there, the final piece of silent revenge I had crafted meticulously. I could feel my heart steady. This was not about anger or confrontation. It was about undeniable proof. Returning to the table, I handed the envelope to my father, saying softly, "I thought you might find this interesting." The room went quiet, conversations halting mid-sentence. My father's brow furrowed slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside were the deeds, consolidated portfolio reports, and proof of all 3 properties I had acquired, fully owned, fully operational, and generating significant income. The disbelief on his face was almost tangible, a mixture of shock, awe, and the first hint of regret for every dismissive comment he had ever made. My mother leaned forward, eyes wide, trying to comprehend the numbers and the scope of what I had accomplished. The room remained silent, the air thick with tension, and for the first time in years, I felt not only vindicated but fully in control. I didn't need to say a word. The results spoke for themselves, and the quiet power of what I had built reverberated through the room, leaving no space for doubt, mockery, or dismissal. The moment my father's eyes scanned the documents, everything changed. There was no shouting, no confrontation, only silence, the kind that carries weight heavier than any argument. I watched him lean back slowly, the disbelief on his face so vivid it was almost tangible, while my mother's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the papers, scanning property deeds, investment portfolios, and rental income statements I had meticulously compiled over years of silent effort. My parents, who had once dismissed every dream I voiced, had no words left. Their assumptions crumbled in real time before them. The room was quiet, but the energy was electric, charged with the realization that the daughter they had underestimated, mocked and doubted, had quietly built an empire that surpassed everything they thought they knew. I smiled, calm and composed, knowing I didn't need to say a single word. The proof was undeniable. My father finally looked up, voice low and measured. How did you manage all of this?" I simply said, "Years of learning, patience, and focus. You told me I wouldn't succeed. I just let the results do the talking." The air shifted completely. Relatives who had been quietly observing leaned in, their whispers a mixture of awe and admiration, and even my parents. Subtle pride could not mask the realization of how profoundly they had misjudged me. I felt a calm satisfaction that went beyond revenge. It was validation, recognition, and complete control, all wrapped in quiet dignity. I wasn't seeking punishment nor humiliation. The triumph was in precision. In proving that belief or lack thereof had never defined me. Every sleepless night, every late hour, every calculated risk and sacrifice had led to this exact moment, and I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of it. My parents, stunned and silent, were forced to witness the reality they had mocked. I realized that the ultimate revenge wasn't anger or confrontation. It was undeniable proof. The quiet victory lingered in the room, tangible, irreversible, and profoundly satisfying. As the evening continued, the tension slowly melted into a new awareness. They now saw me differently, not as a naive daughter, but as someone who had quietly orchestrated her destiny, built her own empire, and claimed success on her own terms. I had won, not through noise or drama, but through patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination. My silent revenge was complete, precise and unforgettable, and the calm satisfaction I felt was immeasurable, a validation of every choice I had ever made.